He rolled into the bank like any other morning, wheels humming softly against the floor. People glanced, some polite, some barely noticing. Then she appeared, a teller with a smirk, a harsh word ready. In an instant, a moment meant to be ordinary turned cruel. Laughter echoed, not behind closed doors, but in plain sight, aimed at him, at his very presence. He didn't respond, not yet. But what she didn't know would flip everything she thought she understood. By the end of this encounter, one question would linger. Who really holds the power? It was a quiet Thursday morning when James wheeled himself out of his downtown apartment, the sun catching the polished frame of his wheelchair. Life had a rhythm he liked: morning coffee at the corner cafe, reviewing bank reports on his tablet, and brief chats with the staff he trusted. On the streets, neighbors waved, street vendors called out familiar greetings, and the city hummed with routine. To anyone passing by, he seemed like just another man going about his day. But behind his calm, there was a story of determination, of building something from nothing. And today, the very place he had built with his own hands, the bank he owned, would become the stage for a moment that challenged not only his patience, but the very assumptions people made about him. Something unexpected was waiting behind those glass doors, something that would change everything in an instant. James rolled into the bank, the familiar scent of polished wood and paper greeting him like an old friend. The lobby buzzed softly with customers and the occasional clatter of coins. He approached the counter, confident, expecting the routine pleasantries that had become part of his mornings. But the teller behind the glass, sharp-eyed and impatient, noticed him immediately. Her expression shifted, a flicker of disdain passing through her eyes as she glanced at his wheelchair, at the suit he wore, at the quiet authority he carried without announcing it. The first words were subtle, almost casual, but the tone carried a sting. A chuckle escaped her as she gestured toward his chair, and James felt the weight of the room shift. Conversation slowed. A few customers glanced over, sensing something off but unsure what. He held his composure, every muscle tense, heart beating faster, as the humiliation began to ripple through the room. This was no accident. Her mockery was deliberate, pointed, and sharp. James moved through the motions, completing his transaction, but the teller's sneer grew bolder. She whispered comments loud enough for nearby customers to hear, her voice dripping with condescension. Anger and disbelief surged inside him, mixing with a calm calculation he had learned over the years. He could respond, confront, or walk away. Every option carried a risk. Every reaction could reveal more than she expected. Then, as he wheeled toward the exit, a customer's phone rang. A brief interruption that made the teller pause. Her attention shifted, and James saw an opening. A quiet, almost imperceptible smirk tugged at his lips as he remembered something she didn't know. Something that would turn the situation upside down. He could feel the tension building, a storm about to break, as he prepared to reveal the truth she never suspected. The other customers watched, unaware of the full story, caught between curiosity and discomfort. James's mind raced, not with fear this time, but with anticipation. The moment was near. She thought she had the upper hand, that her mockery defined him. But in just a few heartbeats, everything she assumed would be shattered. And when it happened, the entire bank would be forced to see him differently, not as a target, but the one holding all the power. James stopped just short of the exit, letting the moment stretch, letting every eye in the bank settle on him. The teller's smirk faltered, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. She had believed she held the power, that her cruel words could humiliate him into silence. But she hadn't counted on one thing. He owned this place. With calm precision, James placed a hand on the counter, his voice steady, but carrying authority that silenced the room. Customers leaned in, some whispering, some frozen in disbelief. The teller's confident facade crumbled as realization dawned. Her mockery had been aimed at the very person who controlled everything in that bank. The tables had turned in an instant. Her words, once sharp and cutting, now hung impotent in the air. James didn't yell, didn't humiliate her in return. He let the truth speak for itself. Every whispered insult, every derisive glance, suddenly seemed small in comparison to the reality she faced. The room held its breath, caught between shock and awe, as the teller grasped the enormity of her mistake. For James, the moment was vindicating, but also reflective. This wasn't about revenge. It was about exposing a prejudice that many still denied existed, about forcing the world, if only just this small corner of it, to recognize injustice for what it was. Every heartbeat pounded with the weight of courage, dignity, and the unshakable reminder that assumptions based on race, ability, or appearance could be shattered in a single, defining instant. As murmurs filled the room and the teller's eyes darted nervously, one thought lingered, powerful and unspoken. Those who underestimate others often pay the highest price for their ignorance. The room slowly settled, the hum of whispered conversations filling the space where tension had once dominated. James wheeled to the center of the lobby, taking a quiet breath. The humiliation he had endured moments ago was replaced with a calm authority. Nothing needed to be said. The truth had spoken louder than any words could. The teller's earlier cruelty had backfired, leaving her confronted not with retaliation, but with the undeniable reality of her prejudice. For James, the incident was more than a personal victory. It was a reminder of the invisible barriers that people face every day, simply because of race or ability. Each glance, each subtle judgment, each casual assumption could carry consequences deeper than most could imagine. And yet, in that small, tense moment, he showed the power of dignity, patience, and resilience. As he left the bank later that morning, the weight of the experience lingered, but so did a quiet hope. The story wasn't just about one teller or one bank. It was about a society still learning how to recognize and confront its own biases. It was a call to see people for who they really are, not the stereotypes they might represent. And as viewers, we are left with a question that echoes far beyond this single incident. How often do we judge without knowing, mock without understanding, or assume without seeing the truth? James's story reminds us that justice isn't always loud, and power isn't always visible, but courage, integrity, and awareness can change even the most ordinary moment into a lesson that resonates far beyond its walls. The real question now is, in our own lives, when faced with prejudice, will we choose understanding, or will we perpetuate the silence that allows it to continue?